Welcome back to the Combo Couch, everyone. Pasta Jardula here.
And it's Fiorella.
Don't be a wise, you know what? That smirk and that smile, making fun of my advantageous personality, fam. It's not necessary. That's who I am. Let me be me.
Yes, I will let you be you, Pasta.
I appreciate that, fam. And happy birthday coming up. I remember when I turned 24. It was a magical time. So happy birthday coming up.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to celebrate my birthday in Moscow. It'll be fun. It's going to be a good time.
Well, great. I'm glad you're going to have a good time in Moscow. But let's bring in our guest because he's awesome. Dude, I've wanted to have on the show for quite some time. Never got to meet him in person until I saw him at the Rage Against the War Machine rally, fam. He was out there covering it. I thought I should be speaking. I would love to talk COVID with this gentleman one day outside of YouTube, maybe on the morning show, or come back on the Combo Couch. We could do it on Rockford and Rumble only because this guy is great. I'd love to go on his show and talk about the COVID stuff. The stuff he's talking about is amazing, but he's also great in foreign policy. He's an amazing journalist. He is an Assange advocate. He is a TNT radio host. He is the Patrick Henningsen. How you doing, Patrick? You're muted. It's okay.
There we go. Great to be with you. Great to be with you.
Oh, man. I'm so happy you're here. Fiorella, Patrick Fiorella.
Pleasure. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you. Yes, I've definitely seen you online for sure, but never formally met online. Good to have you. So, fam, you were excited to have him on. What exactly are we're going to be talking about a little bit about Russia, Ukraine.
Yeah.
Because obviously that's dominating the news right now, and there's so much developing every day. And we've entered a new phase, I believe. It's the Russian offensive phase that we're seeing being played out. So, Pasta, did you want to start off?
No. Why don't we just start right there? I mean, what I had planned on Monday was to ask you about Zelensky's comments as far as, being like, if you're not an American supporting this money, then you're terrible. And then he kind of followed up. I think it was the same. I don't know if it was the same interview, but he followed it up by saying that if, in fact, you don't ship us the money, if you don't give us the F-16s, if you don't give us the long-range missiles, we're going to have to, be defeated. And eventually Russia, because, Vladimir Putin woke up one morning and said, I want to recreate the Soviet Union. And he decided to go into Ukraine. He's then going to go into the Baltic states, Patrick. And that means American children are going to have to spoil their blood, all in the sake of keeping the Baltic states under NATO's oppression. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Zelensky's kind of gone a little bit over the top on this one. The problem is, he's a professional sort of media character now. He's an avatar for a foreign policy information war as well. So he's constantly opining on things that, and he tends to fall back on the same tropes, making these kind of emotional appeals in the way that, it's good in television. It's good if you're some kind of a political advocate, but he's supposed to be president of this country embroiled in this war. And he sort of falls back on the exact same things. He's always trying to go for the emotional strings of the West in order to garner more continuous support, and hanging out with, being validated by Hollywood celebrities constantly, or political celebrities. I always said politics is the new Hollywood post 2015, and so all these political celebrities parachuting into Kiev, and it's kind of inflated his own ego, and he probably believes in a certain way he's a thought leader as well in this conversation. He's completely not. He's got a very limited scope of political analysis, of understanding of politics and geopolitics, I think. So, he's pretty much repeating the exact same lines that are being, fed to us through Western mainstream media by Western politicians, etc. So, and he's just recycling all that back. And I don't think he understands that, there's a limit to this kind of Zelensky brand that's been kind of this construct. There's a limit to how much utility is there with regards to this conflict. And I always said to people, and I said this a couple of times. I even said this when I gave a talk once on this. You know, when there's a war going on and there's a quote state of emergency, you can get away with pretty much anything. As long as there's a state of emergency, everyone will sort of park all their concerns down the road. As soon as it stops, in other words, as soon as there's a negotiation, as soon as there's peace talks, okay, then all of a sudden there's this massive audit that takes place. People in Ukraine, people in Europe, people in the United States will think, wow, look, as soon as you have a chance to breathe and pause, then you say, how did we get here to begin with? And all that conversation begins. That's the sober conversation. That's been postponed. That's not allowed to happen in our media, and it's not allowed to happen politically. And then certain people will take responsibility. They'll have to be held accountable. He's one of those people. He has not had to have been held accountable to this point. He's just been the avatar, the hero, the spokesperson for this anti-Russian effort. And even with his own people, we don't know. We don't hear about what Ukrainians think. All we hear is very curated viewpoints. Their media is completely under state control, and so we don't hear all of that. And then the blowback would begin as soon as he would be then accused, probably by a lot of his own people in Ukraine, as being responsible for losing a third of the country, a third of the population's left, third of the land mass is gone, 100,000, 150,000 plus, maybe. No one knows for sure how many dead soldiers. In our country, in America, as soon as you say 10,000 dead servicemen, people would start freaking out. You're talking in 12 months, double what the U.S. lost in Vietnam over a 10-year period, over a decade. And you don't think there's a political price that he's going to pay for that? That's his legacy. It's what they're doing now is just selling this fantasy projection that Ukraine is on the verge of defeating Russia. Russia's running out of ammo. Russian morale's at an all-time low. Yada yada. Is a whole list of stuff. So we're not living in reality. The West is living in a kind of delusional state, this purgatory, narrative purgatory, and it's all held in place by a state of war and a state of emergency. And it is a good example. You mentioned COVID just a minute ago, Craig, in the intro. The same thing. As soon as the state of emergency is over, and you look at all the blowback now and all the policies, and people are running for the hills now. Everybody that was in charge of anything doesn't want to talk, and literally they're in full rearguard action because the state of emergency is over. That's part of the psychological operation for the Ukraine conflict, not just for us in the West, but literally for Ukraine itself. That's why we're working so hard to prop him up, protect him. Protect the narrative. Don't talk about dead soldiers. It's a blackout on battlefield casualties. This is the first conflict in history where there's a blackout on battlefield casualties. That should be indication enough from people to see how contrived and how carefully managed the information around this conflict is. It's completely disingenuous.
Well, really quickly before Fam asks a question, Fam's just a nickname for me and Fiorella. We have for each other, short for family. But those people who are running for cover for COVID, don't forget, Patrick, they got the WHO treaty and the international health regulations that will hopefully protect them in the event of the next pandemic. So we have to watch about that. And don't ever forget, Putin cured COVID-19. Go ahead, Fam.
So shifting a little bit, just want to ask you, based on everything you said, what do you make of the fact that people say, Putin was unprovoked. Russia could have tried something else. I mean, I have exhausted myself trying to explain to people that Russia entered an ongoing conflict that had been going on since 2014, and you could even say before that. And of course, Ukraine is a country that was intervened by the U.S. We all know the story of Victoria Nuland and everybody else that went there. and how they intervened in that election and ousted their leader. So by default, Ukraine stopped being this sovereign country at that point. But this idea that Russia could have done something else, do you think that there was something else that Russia could have done after now 9 years, but then 8 years of not just death in the Donbass, but obviously the expansion of NATO? We're seeing the push to make Finland and Sweden a part of NATO as fast as possible. And so what we're seeing, or the way Russia looks at it from the interviews I've done and from the people I've talked to, is this is a fight for their lives. This is an existential war to keep Russia as it exists. And they're very much not where Europe is going as far as the liberal agenda, as far as so many agendas. So they see this as a fight for their lives now. It's no longer just about this sort of denazification and the border. It's like, if all of this happens, then Russia ceases to exist. And that was the goal of NATO for a long time, was to break up Russia into small little sectors. What do you make of that statement of people saying, well, Putin could have tried something else? There's always another option beside war.
Yeah, so this is interesting. If you're having this argument, and we're all involved in this discussion and this argument, and the argument comes from the media, from U.S. politicians. You hear this from congressmen, senators too, when they're sort of grandstanding and pontificating, and shouting their sort of platitudes on this. It's so funny how the object of this conversation from a NATO or Western point of view is to have history begin on February 23rd, 2022. Nothing happened before that. All events must be judged without any context, no historical context, not even back a year, no, not even 6 months, not even definitely not back to 2014 or back to 2004 or 1991.
Yeah.
That's completely out of bounds. So it's a question of reframing the conversation. And one of the talking points you hear constantly, I hear them all the time because I'm in these debates with CIA analysts and Fox News pundits, foreign policy experts and stuff. And this is Putin's war of choice. He's violated the territorial sovereignty of a UN member state. And I'm like, the first thing I say in response is, since when has the United States or Britain or anybody else been suddenly concerned with international law? Wow, you guys are so really enthusiastic about it all of a sudden. And you can just go a litany of violations of international law, not just Iraq and not just Libya. Those are kind of obvious examples. Yemen as well, basically ran that war for Saudi Arabia. There's Afghanistan is also a good example, even though there is I believe in NATO Article 5 or a UN resolution on that at the time. But here's the point. Helsinki, the final act of Helsinki, more or less froze borders. That was the agreement. No movement on European borders, period. Right. So, and what happened? The United States and NATO blew that to pieces with the dismemberment of Yugoslavia in the 1990s. And all of a sudden, it's like we don't allow unilateral secession. All of a sudden, they were promoting unilateral secession, broke up Yugoslavia into 1,000 pieces. And not only that, that wasn't enough. They created a NATO protectorate by prying that last piece off Serbia called Kosovo. They created a NATO protectorate in the heart of Europe. They talk about Ukraine like it's in the heart of Europe. It's not. It's on the fringe of Europe. It's on the Eastern European frontier of Europe. Yugoslavia is the heart of Europe. So you have a NATO protectorate, Kosovo. It's not recognized by its neighbors. It's not an official state still after all this time. So they destroyed this Helsinki Accord, Helsinki Agreement. So this already is a weak position for someone to make, because the situation that led to the current conflict in Donbass, there was a whole peace process before that, 8 years of the Minsk Accords, Minsk 1 and 2. And Angela Merkel's already on record saying, "Oh, this was just we sandbagged it." Germany and France, the guarantors, we sandbagged it to buy time to arm Ukraine. So there's already intent there, and so that's just a weak case made by anybody coming from the Washington or NATO perspective on that. But it's even worse than that. because you have the issue of Crimea again. It's there's the self-determination issue versus an annexation or violating the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Crimea, there's hardly any argument anyone can make in the West that's legitimate. Article 51 of the UN Charter. There's two sides to this coin: territorial sovereignty. The other side is called self-determination. And listen, what happened when you have a bloody, violent civil war in Ukraine for 8 years? Petro Poroshenko, a U.S.-backed puppet, literally a U.S.-installed Yatsenyuk regime, and then they had an election soon after that, and Poroshenko comes in, a puppet's puppet. He declares an anti-terror operation against the Donbass. So anybody in the Donbass who is not going along with the U.S.-backed putsch in Kiev is basically a terrorist. So when you raise a NATO-backed, NATO-armed, NATO-trained army against your own population, forget about NATO. Just you become at that point in that civil war epic, the clock is ticking of whether you're going to be a failed state or you're going to be a successful state. The United States had a civil war. It could have been a failed state, but it wasn't. And the Gettysburg Address, and then a new phase in history is created. That's not what's happened in Ukraine. Many states have failed. Multi-ethnic states, multinational states throughout history have failed because a civil war went bad. And then borders are redrawn, and you have autonomous regions that declare independence, that take. So by the letter of the UN Charter, if you want to qualify statehood, Donbass has ticked every single box perfectly. Yeah. Nearly. Now, Crimea is the same. And they always say Russia invaded Crimea and annexed. And I always say Russia couldn't invade Crimea. It was already there. Up to 30,000 troops and personnel in Sevastopol. That's been home of the Black Sea Fleet since Catherine the Great. And by the way, Crimea was part of Russia from before 1953. So it's been reunified with Russia. It's full of Russians, probably 90% or so. Roughly, and which is reflects the referendum results there in 2014. So, but again, it's like the West doesn't want to recognize Crimea, but Kosovo, that's perfectly fine. So, they're really weak on this, and nobody wants to delve into the details of this. And they say, well, we want to retake every inch of Ukrainian territory, and we're not going to go to the peace table, and Zelensky's not going to submit to any peace talks until Russia withdraws to its 1991 borders. Well, look, the chances of that happening at this point are the same as Israel withdrawing to its 1949 borders or something like this. As much as anybody would like to see that happen, it's not realistic. Because Israel is a nuclear armed power, vastly outguns and dominates Palestine, the occupied territories, but yet we support Israel's seizure of the Golan Heights, the Sheba Farms, and the Jordan Valley. So it's like the Oslo Accords. It's an interesting parallel. The Oslo Accords, roughly the same period, 8 years of sandbagging to allow Israel to build settlements, and look at the Minsk Accords. It was the same thing, a bogus peace process that was hijacked and undermined by Western interests. So, I mean, hey, look, I'm not trying to tell people how to adjudicate these historical situations. I'm just saying that let's take a wider view of history, and let's have an adult conversation about this. And nobody wants to have that conversation in the U.S. media and political spheres in Britain as well. They're completely narrow-minded on this. They don't want to have to consider any extenuating circumstances because it destroys the narrative which they've worked so hard to construct.
Sandbagging in the sports realm means to pretending to be involved fully while lulling your opponent to sleep to try to obtain another objection. And that's exactly what they did in this situation. And you were mentioning pork chop Poroshenko. That's what we called him because we started our show in 2017. I think by our fourth show, we were talking about what was going on in the Ukraine. Pork chop Poroshenko, Biden attended his inauguration. I mean, this guy admitted to building a NATO base inside Ukraine when they weren't even a NATO state. And I just want to ask you a question too as well, because you kind of answered the question that Fam answered. And you can go back to 2004, you can go back to 1991, but just even going back to 2014, from the time they were sandbagging the Minsk agreements 1 and 2, trying to find a peace process, what do you think was the deciding factor? Because I made this tweet the other day, and I would like your opinion, because we're probably on the same page as on COVID and what happened with that whole situation. We're there, so we understand what it was all about. I was reading the papers you put out by the 2 doctors with the 4 pillars, talking about the global agenda and whatnot. And I kind of try to beat my anti-imperialist friends over the head with what's going on, whatever you want to call it. There's a global agenda. But look at this tweet I put out there. What are your thoughts? The question is, in your opinion, which event, which was most influential in Russia or Putin committing to military action? I want you to give me 2 answers. I want you to give me the one that was the most influential, but then I want you to give me the one, Patrick, which was the straw that broke the camel's back. NATO won the poll. There was 412 votes. They got about 55%. NATO's expansion eastward. Nazis bombing in the Donbass was second place. Here was my vote. 46 biolabs funded by the DOD. And the last one, Zelensky wanting nukes. In your opinion, which one of these was the major factor in Putin and the Russian Federation going, okay, enough is enough, we're going in there? And which other one was the straw that broke the camel's back? Go right ahead.
Looking at that poll right there, I go with the Vox Populi. I go with the people on that. To me, that sliding scale is pretty accurate. So the NATO expansion issue, that's a long-running problem, and Russia went to, it's like it was the November, December of 2021. They went directly to the U.S. Delegation, the State Department. Anthony Blinken had in his hand a letter saying, we need to renegotiate the security arrangement for Russia, Europe with you. It needs to happen now. Otherwise, this is going to go badly very quickly. And they pretty much just ignored it. I don't probably took their time responding to it as if it was like, playing very blasé about it. I really think that the U.S. did everything in its power and NATO. But when we talk about NATO, it's the United States and Britain. Everybody else is a minion state. Let's be realistic.
France got a little.
France has never fully been in NATO. They weren't in NATO before. They were out, and then they got pulled back in. So France has always got this independent streak, and that's that's always been a threat to the United States. If you remember, Donald Rumsfeld, before the Iraq invasion in 2003, he made this quip about old Europe and new Europe. Francois Mitterrand, the French president, didn't support the Iraq war. Schroeder in Germany at the time, chancellor, he didn't either. And that was old Europe. That was like, we need to deal with old Europe and we need to build a new Europe. And
Since Libya, they've seen they've been all aboard with everything. Sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
Well, the Maghreb and Libya is always France. Sarkozy at the time, felt that that's in their kind of foreign policy sphere. So they kind of front ran the Libya thing. Although who did the heavy lifting on air sorties at the beginning of that conflict was Norway. Norway is the eminence gris of NATO. That's probably the third partner behind Britain. For the United States, doing the dirty work on so many different. Cy Hirsch outlined this beautifully in one of his recent articles. But so the whole idea of the NATO expansion, this has been a long-running problem. And the Cuban Missile Crisis is a good allegory here because. During 1962, the direct threat, and most people would side with John F. Kennedy, although Russia was really responding to nuclear weapons that U.S. NATO placed in Turkey, very close to Russia's borders at the time. But even leaving that aside, you could back JFK and the United States in the Cuban Missile Crisis and say, yep, that's fine, because the U.S. has already illustrated a Monroe Doctrine for many years. So that's a known entity. Now, the situation that Moscow faces now, they're in the exact same position as JFK in the United States were in 1962. Much worse, in fact, because you have vectors all the way from Kaliningrad in the Baltic Sea right down along the Eastern European rim, right down below the Black Sea. I mean, potential missile vectors, a nuclear shield being installed in Germany as we speak, plus Czech Republic, and nuclear tipped potential hypersonic missile, 7 minutes air flight if Ukraine becomes a NATO member. And let's also not kid ourselves. Ukraine is a NATO state now. NATO arms, NATO trainers, NATO satellites parked above Ukraine, giving targeting information to NATO armed and trained and NATO officers, U.S. Navy SEALs, SAS, SBS, all the top special forces. They're active in Ukraine, and don't let anybody tell you any differently. Plus all the mercenaries and soldiers on leave, plus all the gear. Okay, it's a NATO state in everything but name. Okay, so imagine if it was formalized. Imagine if there were missiles, a missile shield in Ukraine. Unacceptable. It'd be unacceptable for us. It'd be unacceptable for Britain if it was all across the English Channel. It would be unacceptable for anybody. And to add to that, and going down your poll list there, so NATO enlargement, the Budapest Memorandum, or Bucharest Memorandum, whatever, where they said Ukraine has to give up their nukes, and Russia guaranteed their safety, and Russia somehow, gone back on that. That 1994 agreement, first of all, they weren't Ukraine's nukes; they were the Soviet Union's nukes. Secondly, it's null and void because that was before NATO expanded right up to the Baltics and right around to the Black Sea. So that's null and void. It's a non-issue on that argument. So, but going down your polling list there, yeah, so the Donbass. So then you have a humanitarian imperative. And so that is defending what Moscow sees as Russian people. So that's a very strong case. So that plays very strong to the Russian domestic audience, and in terms of the national identity. So that's huge. That's massive. And as I said before, Donetsk and Lugansk had done everything to the letter. That's why Russia didn't move in earlier to defend those territories or help those self-defense forces earlier, because they weren't finished with their statehood process, the pre-statehood process. History is going to look back on all of these things. At least Russia's a big believer in international law. I know that will upset a lot of Americans if I say that, but they do have put a lot of faith into the international community and the system. They've always tried to work through the multilateral institutions. This is a special situation that we've had. It was inflamed by the U.S.-backed coup in the Maidan in Kiev in 2014. And that also had changed the whole scope of the whole situation. This could have been avoided very easily, but again, United States and I think they did everything possible to draw Russia into this situation, everything possible, knowing that it could happen and knowing that they would then wage a low-cost war against Russia by global sanctions and a global embargo to bring its economy to its knees, and then to somehow create internal pressure that would foment regime change. That's a formula that they've tried with Syria, with Iran, with other countries, Yemen to a lesser degree, and other countries as well. So that's a known formula by the U.S. and NATO. That's just not like we're not spitballing here. Like that's the people in the West, especially the Fox News crowd, still look back and say to themselves, and I'm not picking on the Fox News crowd, the CNN crowd is just the same, that we won the Cold War because of American capitalism, and we brought the Russian Soviet Empire to their knees through the wonders of capitalism. Okay, it's a nice narrative, it's a nice story, but that's not the case. It was the Soviet Union was imploding from within for a number of its own structural inequities and problems, and it was just a question of time before it collapsed for so many different reasons. But we still believe that we can win wars without deploying troops, without deploying military, or to use proxies. The biggest proxy war the United States ever, and its allies ever undertook, much bigger than Operation Cyclone in Afghanistan, was the Syrian war. So 10 years of weapons trafficking, of hundreds of thousands of foreign fighters. So think about the Spanish Civil War, the international brigades, all the multinational effort that went into that. It's the same thing in Syria. We trafficked untold weapons in there from 10 different directions, and even flew in fighters from Uyghurs from Xinjiang province in western China. So I mean, it was a free for all. And guess what? We haven't won. And by the way, you want to make the territorial integrity claim? Why are we occupying Syria's oil fields in Deir ez-Zor now with 500 U.S. troops, encouraging the Kurds unilateral secession of Rojava, northeastern Syria, where all their resources are? At the same time, we're sanctioning Syria to choke off their ability to buy oil and buy fuel. I mean, we can't even get into hypocrisy. It's just outrageously, it's way off the charts. But so to anybody pontificating or making these like moral stance about Putin's war of aggression in Ukraine, it's so ridiculous. But when can we have this debate? When can we have this conversation on a mainstream platform or not? That's the thing.
Yeah, you mentioned the sanctions and the sanctions that the West has placed on Russia, and of course Europe also facing a default because of those sanctions. I mean, Germany in particular is falling apart economically because they've lost the cheap energy from Russia. However, the sanctions have not affected Russia in the way the West wanted. Russia has found and opened up its economic relationship with new markets in China, India, Pakistan. It is continuing to develop its relationships with the East and global South now more than ever. And that's clearly a shift that we're seeing, not just with Russia, but it's almost like Russia lit this sort of flame, and then everybody else was like, oh yes, by the way, we're gonna try to de-dollarize. We're gonna try to find other alternative routes. Right now, a year after the conflict, where do you see this conflict both on the ground? How do you see that ending? And also in terms of the global economy, how do you see this playing out? Because on the horizon, what I'm seeing is China. And of course, I think the other aspect is the China aspect, where the U.S. is, you had Lindsey Graham not too long ago say that they're going to fight to the last Taiwanese person.
Well, you said the same thing.
And yeah. So they're looking to sort of because China is the bigger economy. China is the more threatening, I think, economy to the United States in terms of unilateralism versus multilateralism. So where do you see all of this going?
Okay. So definitely this attempt to bifurcate the global economy, to drop an iron curtain, a new iron curtain, economic iron curtain along European territory, and to split Russia away from Western Europe and the quote international community. I think it is a bit of a ham-fisted effort, and whatever revenue Russia has lost in terms of oil and gas from supplying Europe, obviously that would be the ideal partner. It's probably going to recoup a large percentage of that through other deals in Asia, and it might end up coming back to supply energy to Europe at some point, maybe in the near future, as soon as peace negotiations begin. It depends how this thing's going to flesh out in Europe. But the whole point of this is long-term geostrategy of the United States. If you read Zbigniew Brzezinski's Grand Chessboard and you're familiar with that being the dominant mode of U.S. grand strategy for the last, let's say, 50, 60 years, And then you add to that British grand strategy, and that's the one that people don't like to talk about, aren't interested in. Hey, the British Empire is no longer a thing. You know, they changed hands after the Second World War, and the United States carried the mantle of the global hegemon, etc., leading the New World Order post World War II, liberal, internationalist, U.S.-led world order. Not the case. The great game, Britain has been playing the great game with Asia and Russia and Eurasia for 300 years. Okay. And the whole point of the great game, which was to make sure that Russia could not join with Europe, specifically Prussia and Germany,
Yeah.
as the main emerging mercantile powers and later industrial power of Europe. And that had to be anything to divide that. And not only that, is Russia was developing good relations with India.
Very good relations.
So through the 19th century, and so the wars in Afghanistan in the 1900s were to disrupt that. They didn't want to have a Silk Road to Europe, a land road. Britain was a sea power, emerging sea power, dominating East India Trading Company, Dutch East India Company, and so forth. The China Silk Road by sea is really the heart of the British imperial project. So that's what the great game was about, and Britain's played it brilliantly, but very messy as well for the people who got caught in the middle of this, like Afghanistan and so many different countries. But so that project is still ongoing. The Belt and Road Initiative is just the latest iteration of that same Silk Road project. That who would benefit the most from an overland trade railway and highway network connecting Europe to Asia? Of course, Germany is well positioned to benefit the most by their expertise, their innovation, and their industrial acumen. But where were they getting their energy from? Well, they're getting it from Russia. Cheap, affordable, long-term contract gas that would power the German. And so Germany would then become powerful. And that was always the goal of the U.S., was to keep that the Secretary General, British Secretary General of NATO, Hastings Ismay, in 1952, said the whole purpose of NATO, remember, is to keep the Americans in Europe, the Russians out, Soviets at the time, and the Germans down. Because the West, Britain and U.S. believe that if Germany becomes too powerful, then they can then direct European political and economic affairs. So NATO is nothing more than the glove in which the U.S. can insert its hand to steer economic and political affairs of Europe. It's that simple. It's always been that way. And Britain is the chief whip for the United States in that process. So the new function of NATO is as a protection racket. It's an international protection racket. You buy our weapons, we'll protect you. You buy our fuel. It's more expensive, but like the wise guy and the mafia wise guy, hey, it's a little bit more expensive, but you know what? We'll give you some extra protection. It's worth it. Take our LNG.
Nobody robs old Tony.
Forget about it. You want to buy.
Nobody, banks get knocked off. Nobody knocks off old Tony. Please continue, Patrick.
That's right. There's a lot of broken windows around Europe. It's kind of getting dangerous here. But that's what NATO is. It's a protection racket. Yeah. It's functioning. It's like the perfect protection racket. They're getting all these European countries to empty their stockades, which become scrap metal in Ukraine. And they backfill them. They say, we'll backfill Poland, get rid of your MiGs, give them to Zelensky. We'll backfill those with new Typhoons and F-16s. They're not giving them new planes for free. They're going to buy those. Polish taxpayers are going to pay for that. Poland's going to go into debt to buy British and American defense gear, latest gear, okay? Plus the permanent U.S. base in Poland, permanent U.S. base. So the Iron Curtain gets pushed further east. And that's where the U.S. is right now, by the way. Germany's under the bus. They'll still occupy Germany, Stuttgart, Ramstein, and the NSA listing base, etc. They're all the drone, global logistics, satellite link-ups are all out of Germany. The Iron Dome in Tel Aviv and the Iron Dome in Israel is managed out of Stuttgart, Germany. That's a U.S. Patriot missile battery array. That's what the Iron Dome is, managed out of Germany. So but Poland will be the new. So that'll be the prize for Washington. If they can't get a military victory in Ukraine, the prize is we've moved our footprint further east and expanded NATO to the north, and hopefully maybe pick up Moldova to the south. Georgia is probably a non-starter. So Washington has to sell this, all the money they've spent and all the political capital that's been expended, and what Ukraine has had to, lose in terms of people and territory. They have to get a win out of this. What's the win? It's the win is pushing the Iron Curtain to the east and expanding NATO. They could walk away from that and sort of say, we saved Europe from Putin's not marching on Paris right now, like Hitler. I mean, that's the narrative I think that the West, Biden or whoever comes after him, would want to sell.
Well, let me just say this much, and like I say this to my business partner Fiorello over here, Patrick. We need to work on your Italian New York accent. I'm gonna work on that with you guys. We'll get you in a better spot. You guys are okay. You have heart, but you're just missing it a little bit. But since I have you on here, and I threw up the biolabs as one of the choices. There's 47 biolabs funded by the State Department or the Pentagon, excuse me. We have receipts on this. We know this. A lot of people said that that's when Putin was good. When he went in there in the beginning, he went all throughout Ukraine, bombing those labs and getting rid of them. So the question I have is, where do you place Putin and Xi on the Great Reset? I mean, do you look at them as a player in the Great Reset, or do you look at them as with some of us think that they're both walking away, going, nah, have fun, Klaus. You guys do your thing. We're out of this. You've made bioweapons maybe to target our DNA. I mean, that's why I think a lot of people were kind of freaked out. I mean, it did take place in Wuhan. We don't know if and I agree with you. And it is not a lab leak. Stop using the term leak anymore, but we're on YouTube, so let's not say anything else. But what is your thoughts? Where is Putin and Xi on the Great Reset? A player, or are they just walking away?
I'll comment on that, and I'll also comment on the biolabs, because that's a subject I know very well, having worked on investigations on the Lugar Center in Georgia as well years back. Okay, so I'm really familiar with this issue. But in terms of the Great Reset, I think the best way to look at that is, well, obviously Russia's been erased from the World Economic Forum's website in all shapes and pages and images, gone. That should tell you all you need to know about there's this kind of proclivity in alternative media for this Manichean worldview that sees Klaus Schwab lording over the world. And it might have looked like that in the aftermath of the so-called pandemic, but the reality is, in terms of hard power and geopolitics, Russia is a major global player in energy as well. You can't have a fourth industrial revolution unless you can power the baseload of a modern European city. And I've got a news flash for the Greens. Wind and solar ain't going to cut it. So eventually they have to go, and neither is paying fivefold for US LNG by bottle on a boat from Texas. It's not going to work. So you're going to have to end up going back to, quote, fossil fuels, hydrocarbons, more accurately, hydrocarbons. You're going to have to go back to that. So then the question is, you should always ask yourself, is the Great Reset driving geopolitics, or is geopolitics driving the Great Reset? And the United States has never fully been in the Paris Accords. And if you look at the bottom line, yeah, they're pushing the Green New Deal, and they're pushing all these sort of Great Reset policies. But in my opinion, a lot of this has been just to convince the rest of Europe to go along with it, because the United States has to be seen to be doing it. But the US can pull back from that at a moment's notice and throw Europe completely under the bus and get Europe dependent on their fossil fuels. And guess what? Look what happened in the last 6 months, 12 months. That's exactly what's happening.
Fuels, yeah.
So I've written extensively on this for a New Dawn magazine at 21st Century Wire, and I've said that's the research question. And I think that geopolitics drives the Great Reset. In other words, the Great Reset is a tool of geopolitics, because who is at the top of the heap in terms of great powers? That has not changed. So it's still the United States and its allies, and then you have China and the BRICS nations as well, forming their own interest bloc, but it's not formalized yet. So, so China, again, China will go along with the green climate change conversation to a degree, but at the end of the day, they're building a coal plant every month in China. So it's not anything that's constraining them at the moment. Same with Russia. So, and listen, the Russia and China, and before this conflict began, if you're running these countries and you have representation at the UN and Sustainable Development Goal meetings and so, you have to send your people there. You have to have representatives there. You've got to send your people to the World Economic Forum. You've got to be on board with AI. You even have to have a contingency for central bank digital currency, even if it's not your preferred mode of financial a vehicle for currency. You still have to have your finger in it, because if half the world goes for it and you don't, you could end up potentially being cut off from a new system. So in that sense, everyone's kind of globalized. It's a globalized world, and they're all kind of tied into each other in that sense. It doesn't mean that they're in league with Schwab and plotting to somehow take down the good, liberty loving, freedom people of the world. It's not that simple. That's one of the fatal flaws that you get in alternative and independent discourse. They get sucked into it a little bit too far, and then they lose sight of realist international politics. Yeah.
They blaming China for everything, from the American right, the populist right, the America First right. Like, I said that in my speech there at that Rage Against the War Machine. Don't think we're going to let you take money out of Kiev to end the proxy war with Moscow, and then go over to China, into Taiwan, and start a proxy war with Beijing. So yeah, I think a lot of people do in this sphere of independent media get caught up on certain things. Fam, I'm so sorry. Your question.
Just my last question is, do you see this conflict ending soon in terms of Russia and Ukraine? I mean, there's not much else that Ukraine can do, to be honest. The West continues supplying them, and Lavrov and Putin have both said the more the West continues supplying Ukraine with long-range missiles, the further Russia will have to push in to make sure that its borders are protected. Russia has stated this many times. They've also stated that they're ready for diplomacy and for peace talks, but that doesn't mean that Russia's just going to leave, as is what NATO wants. And another thing that's been going on is Russia has almost encircled the area of Artyomsk, or what is known now as Bakhmut. And that area is a very crucial strategic point for the military. It allows the passage of weapons and of soldiers. And without that, it's going to take a really, really a detriment to Ukraine's army. And that's just one of the major strongholds. But we're seeing Russia now push further and further in. And of course, what you mentioned earlier, the reality that the West is getting in media is that Russia's losing, when that's really clearly not the case here. Do you see this conflict ending soon? In what ways? I mean, it's just, nobody knows, but in your opinion?
Yeah, nobody knows. Nobody knows. Look, this started from a U.S. perspective. That's the dominant actor on that side of things. So what Washington wants and does is going to determine the trajectory of this period. And forget about the international community. Didn't make a difference in Iraq, ain't going to make a difference here.
Yeah.
So it's a political problem in America, because half of America believes, or more than half believe, that Russia somehow meddled in the 2016 elections and put Donald Trump in power, and that sort of builds the anti-Russian hate that's become so in vogue in America. That's a political problem. And so to have a country supporting this level of military support and cash to throw into a black hole indefinitely, that's a political issue. So if it's a political problem, then the solution, of course, is not going to be military. It can't be. It has to be a political solution. The political solution would come in the form of new leadership in an election, through the process of a national election campaign, where the issue then changes and takes shape. Now, Russia has time on its side, because this is in their backyard. Ukraine does not have time on its side. Zelensky is probably fighting off a palace coup as we speak, and that will be a constant threat. And if there's any peace talks or any ceasefire, he's out, period, because people are going to blame him straight away for destroying the country and not following through with the Minsk peace processes like he promised he would when he ran for president. Okay, he's not being held accountable. Again, first point we made, because it's a quote state of war or state of emergency. So for the U.S., they don't have time on their side. 2024 election cycle, any Republican, Donald Trump's already occupying the anti-war this last week. He said that we need to end this. This is a waste. Zelensky's, it's a disaster. So he's already gazumped all of the Republican field on this. So that's Trump's area. The Democrats are now having to play catch up on that. So they can't parrot Trump's position. So they have to do something different. And that might be a longer path. So Russia has time on its side. The U.S. doesn't. NATO doesn't. Europe definitely doesn't. Europe is at the end of its rope right now, today. Germany, France, other countries, there's anti-NATO protests popping up. They will not be able to contain them unless COVID reappears and they lock everybody down again. So they don't have time on their side either. So from that point of view, we could see movement in some kind of negotiations in the next few months, few weeks, few months, maybe 6 months. Or this could continue on for a year or two of us just continue plowing weapons and giving military support, maybe playing some sabotage games along the periphery. But that's no good, because if Ukraine doesn't have soldiers to fight, it doesn't matter how many tanks you give them. And it doesn't matter how many jets you park on an airfield in Lviv. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So it's an unwinnable, from a military point of view, this is unwinnable. Politically, it's only winnable so long as it's happening. As soon as the pause comes, then the politics changes completely. And then the other people rush in to take advantage of the potential victory of being part of the negotiation for peace. And there's some political capital to be won there. That's where Donald Trump is putting his, or as Ron DeSantis is also opined the same way on that this past week. So, but yeah, so that's my kind of thoughts on this. I mean, it's got a time limit on it, but the bleeding could be severe before that happens. So, I hope that the politics in America can transform the situation a little bit and steer it in the right direction. And NATO doesn't do anything stupid like make a major false flag or a provocation like a dirty bomb or something like that, which almost happened at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant when Ukrainian forces were shelling the nuclear power plant. That didn't even make it into the Western press. But if there was any kind of a radiological incident, that would have been all over our media, and guess who would have been blamed for letting off a tactical nuke or a dirty bomb? Would have been Russia.
Absolutely.
Do you need evidence for that? Of course you don't, because the hyperdrive of the media would be in full swing, and we'd be boom on war footing like in 24 hours. And just like every other false flag or misunderstanding throughout history, nobody would have time to sort out the details until after the smoke clears. And we do not want to be in that position. I'll tell you, not with Russia and the United States and other nuclear powers involved. We do not want to be in that position, period. That would just be the worst possible outcome.
I've never heard the word gazumped before, but how do you spell that? Gazumped?
It's a real estate term.
It is?
Yeah, it's in Britain, it's a real estate term. It's when you see a property and someone runs and buys it, or to flip it before a real buyer could come in to buy it properly. You got gazumped. I had my eyes on that one, but we got gazumped.
We got gazumped. Well, a lot has changed with this whole conflict. Do you think Putin will try to take Kiev? I don't think there's any way that he'll let any type of puppet government exist in Ukraine ever again. In the beginning of the conflict, I thought, no, he'll just annex and once again, I don't even think we should say annex. These people voted over 92% between both regions, whether it be Crimea or the Donetsk or the Luhansk regions. They voted overwhelmingly to rejoin the Russian Federation. And I said at that time, Putin will find a way to just make a deal, find a way to peacefully calm things down and move on. He'll take that and go. But I don't think Putin will allow, or the Russian Federation for that matter, will allow a government to exist the way it did in Kiev, What are your thoughts with everything going on in Bakhmut and that region about to be sewn up for Russia? Do you think he'll then now use the reserves? Because let's also point out, while this Western media was sitting saying that they're going to have a winter offensive, they never said that. I can't find one Russian official that said winter is coming and here we come. The reserves they got lining up, they'll be ready by the end of March. And after they take Bakhmut, here they can go now and go and take the whole country. Do you see that happening in your personal opinion, Patrick?
Listen, a lot of things could happen. Things could change very quickly. You saw how quickly Russia rolled into Ukraine in the first couple of weeks of the conflict, of the special military operation, Russian intervention last February, March. It was very quick. And, from a military strategic point of view, U.S. military heads, there's experts on every corner now in the U.S., but they'll say that, and the popular CNN, Beltway, Fox talking point is Russia, Putin tried to take Kiev, but he was met with fierce resistance from the Ukrainians, and he got more than he bargained for, and he had to turn tail and run. And it was a humiliating defeat for Vladimir Putin. What they failed to mention, of course, is while that was happening, Russia secured Mariupol and secured all the important industrial sectors, right down to basically create a land bridge to Crimea, which strategically is what they wanted to do from the beginning.
And the troops had to stay in Kiev then and guard it. They couldn't go out. I mean, that was genius in my mind. They had to stay there.
Yeah, it held up. It held up a large portion of the Ukrainian forces, and also it created a whole distraction for the Western media because Kiev, that's the big ticket, right? So this is called a fate in military strategy terms. Is that what happened? It certainly looks like it. And let the military historians and write the memoirs of the Russian generals. They'll figure that out later. But what would happen if Russia was to take Kiev? They wouldn't have to take it at that point. It would be a negotiated entrance to secure and demilitarize, or they would provide the security as the victors. And so this might also come, and here's where it gets sticky. This might also come with a quid pro quo on the European side. Because if you look at the history of major wars in Europe, the great powers on the Western side will always want to carve up the spoils. And so in this case, Poland would want to repatriate part of Western Ukraine into Poland, ergo into the European Union as well, into NATO. And they might see that as a security concern. That's not them, by the way. That's the United States working through them. But and then a demilitarized zone somewhere along those lines, a DMZ, a North Korean frozen conflict zone, something like that. So there would have to be some kind of a reciprocal agreement with Russia that they would get something if Russia got something. It would have to be that way. That's always been that way in history. So I would be surprised if that didn't happen this time. So that's and as far as Odessa goes, that is a huge unresolved issue there because that area identifies as part of the Russian world, Novorossiya, and just historically more than any other region in Ukraine. So, and that would be the ultimate national security achievement for Russia, because if they were to retake Odessa, they would then probably have join up with Transnistria, would be absorbed into the Russian Federation. But that would also create a security problem. So with those tenuous new Russian Federation additional regions there, they would have to push out further into Ukraine to create, again, a security buffer zone. And so if we're having this conversation, then actually I reconsider my last point on whether this is going to end soon. Maybe not. I mean, maybe Russia has a lot of work to do, and it would take them years to achieve that. Are they willing to pay that price and time and treasure and blood? Probably yes. They'd rather do it now than have to do it again in 10 or 15 or 20 years. So it's not a pretty picture any way you cut it. It's not pretty for Ukraine. It's not pretty for Europe and U.S. got Atlantic and Pacific on each side, friendly neighbors to the north and south. We don't care. It's a business transaction. for us. We get rebuilding contracts, missile shields, gear. We'll do fine. The United States will do absolutely fine, no matter what happens. And that's the problem, actually, if you want to drill right down to it.
Yeah. Fam, anything else for Mr. Patrick Henningsen while we got him here? Because I can't wait to get him on and talk some COVID stuff. So
on the biolabs, okay. What we learned when I was working with a really good journalist from Bulgaria, Diliana Gaycheniera, on the Lugar Center story, and she did amazing research on this. We learned that the staff at this U.S. biolab had diplomatic passports, diplomatic immunity. Okay, why would you have diplomatic immunity? And and this is something to consider with all of those biolabs in Ukraine. It's not a question of what they were working on. Nobody knows for sure. And would it be of any consequence? Because, this is for another conversation we can have, but the bioweapons industry is one of the biggest vaporware industries ever. Okay, think of the dot-com boom. They have, but it attracts the most amount of funding because it's a hangover from the Cold War. What it is, however, is an amazing front for intelligence operations, because they can go anywhere in the world, and it's about threat reduction, DoD, defense threat reduction, pandemic reduction, protecting the world from pathogens, securing former Soviet biostocks, and etc. It's a great, you can go anywhere, you can get carte blanche, you can set up major facilities right along the Russian border. It is the most beautiful intelligence front you could possibly ever imagine. And the bonus is all the big contractors in big pharma and who build the BSL labs, all American companies. That's just money for nothing, basically. So I look at it in that sense. Of course, Russia has to take it seriously as a potential threat, as China would or anybody would. But it's really tenuous, because if you look at what they've produced, there's been no breakthroughs in gain of function.
never.
And none of these bioweapons, as we know them in a Hollywood sense, have ever been released or ever really been seen to work in the world. And if you look at the history of bioweapons, a lot of it is BS, but it's really lucrative BS. You can, if you just patent, you register a patent of a spike protein or something, you can raise tens of millions of dollars on the back of that patent application, or when you get a patent secured. It doesn't mean that you've actually produced anything. And that's one of the biggest scams of any industry, is biotech and genomic sequencing. And we're just learning about this now. So I look at the lab leak as the same sort of thing. I think China has been duped by the U.S. government, and look at everybody now suddenly believes the U.S. government because they released a report on lab leak, and all of a sudden, oh, it's true because the U.S. government says it's true. I mean, how easily people are manipulated. That's my take, and I have a lot more to offer on that. But on the Ukrainian biolab side, rightly, Russia's taking it very seriously, but I think it was more of a military intelligence front by the United States and Germany, the Bundeswehr and the U.S. military, the DoD, were running all of those labs from Kharkiv all the way along the border, all of them. So it's a great front. Look, because they were preparing for this for years, this conflict. And I think those CIA facilities there, some of those companies who built those labs had seed funding from InQtel, the CIA seed funder. So, and Hunter Biden probably has some immunity level with the CIA, and his old man probably set that up.
Yeah.
So that's why he'll only get a slap on the wrist, because he was half protected by the company. Just think of Barry Seal, able to do all the side business, but still working with the agency. More likely, that's a more plausible explanation of what you're looking at there. All this side hustle.
Barry Seal, though, was thrown to the wolves, though, right? I mean, so I don't know if that's going to happen with Hunter, but Zelensky. Zelensky might be Gaddafi. Remember Gaddafi? We were against him till we were with him. Then we were against him again. They threw him to the wolves.
If Hunter Biden was Barry Seal, it would have been a very different ending to that story.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. So, but all I'm saying here is is consider more possibilities of what you're looking at. I think there's more to these stories, I think, than whatever the mainstream is serving up right now on this stuff. I guarantee you it's completely limited hangout, and it's completely made for misdirection. That's my instinct. I've always betted on that way, and I've been 90% right every time. So if you're betting on horses, that's pretty good. You know, you might lose a couple, but
I'm going
but
to the horse track with you, pal.
yeah, I know some good horse tipsters. I don't gamble though. That's not my game, but I know some good ones.
Ladies and gentlemen, Patrick Henningsen
man.
here. Let everybody know where they can find you. And I know you're on TNT Radio. What days, what times? Where's your Substack at? Your Twitter, the whole 9 yards. I got so many things I want to talk to you about. This was just the tip of the iceberg. I am glad you came on. Please come on again soon.
Yeah. No, so my main website, of course, is 21stcenturywire.com. I've been going for over 10 years as an independent media platform. And the main show there is the Sunday Wire. It's live every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. UK time. That's a long form 3-hour live radio stroke podcast. And then TNT Radio, Monday to Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. UK time. And that's 5 days a week. That's action-packed live radio. Again, gets converted into podcast. And also I do the UK Column News, which is the top UK alternative media outlet. And I do live on television Fridays. I'm a co-anchor on that program. Great organization. And I do that from 1 p.m. UK time until I think it finishes about 3 p.m. So 2 hours. So we do 7 shows a week plus daily content on 21st Century Wire. I'm not on Substack yet, but I will be hopefully soon. I haven't quite got there yet, so I'm a little bit
You're
slow.
You're a
overloaded.
busy man.
I know. Holy
Yeah.
cow, you're like us. See the RT Convo Couch, AM. We have all these shows and everything going on, but you know, sometimes it's necessary to get that information out there. I think your work has been truly amazing, Patrick, and I look forward to having more conversations with you down the road.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much,
Thank you for inviting me. It's great talking to you. Great to meet you guys.
And I'd love to come on your show and talk about elections because I got the goods for you there. I got some stuff for you. I got some really good stuff. I know that TNT audience, they love election stuff. Anytime I go on a TNT show, they want to know about elections. That's why I like that network, because I feel that you guys are very centered. You know what I'm saying? You're all over the place. You can't put yourself in a box. You're not conservative. You're not liberal. You're independent minded, and continue to do that great work out there, my friend.
Yep. Yeah. We can't put us in a box like Rage Against the War Machine and other things like this. It's not easy to categorize, but we're all kind of trying to find out the truth about what's going on in the world as best we can, get closest to it, and do the best we can.
Thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick.
Patrick Henningsen, fam. How you doing over there?
Me?
Wow, that was an awesome guest.
Yeah.
I love that. I've been wanting to have him on for a while. To get to meet him in person at the Rage Against the War Machine rally was awesome. Fam, we do have about 32 people hanging out premium style on the Rockfin. Anthony said Zelensky and NATO are carrying out a genocide of the Ukrainian people. They certainly are. I mean, fam, have you seen any of those videos where these Ukrainian soldiers are trying to grab civilians to bring them to the front line to get caught up in the meat grinder? There was a dude on the ground. He was laying. He refused to go there. There was another video of babushkas yelling at slapping the Ukrainian soldiers saying, leave these kids alone. Holy cow, fam.
There's been reports of Ukrainians turning against Ukraine, essentially, and trying to join Russia because of this, because they see the ultimate fate of Ukraine. Also the treatment from the soldiers. And I think I mentioned it last show, the refugees that you're seeing leaving Ukraine, the way it's framed in the West is they're leaving from Russia's aggression and Russian violence, but they're actually leaving from being victims to the Ukrainian war and the Ukrainian persecution. If you're a man, they'll literally put you to the front lines, and a lot of these people don't want to fight, so they're like forcing them. Basically, what's going on in Ukraine is everything they accuse Russia of doing. Everything they accuse Russia of doing is exactly what's going on in Ukraine. This projection that we've seen, Putin is forcing young people to go and fight. That didn't happen. There was like a whole list of like reasons why you didn't have to and blah blah blah. And then like, but in Ukraine, it's like no, they're like forcing people. So it's kind of like everything that they accused Russia of is what Ukraine is doing. And right now, the situation, as Patrick was mentioning too, is not good, right? So yeah, it's really bad. And again, if you care about Ukrainians, the quickest solution is for them to, for NATO to stop supplying weapons. But this isn't even Ukraine's decision. This is our country's decision, right? Like NATO is the United States. Like, let's be real.
Yeah, absolutely. And the second Super Ray, and thank you for the Super Ray contributions. That was Anthony. This is Jim Garrison. You know, Jim Garrison was the first one to try Clay Barker, I believe his name was, or Clay whatever, for the murder of John F. Kennedy. Jim Garrison came up short in that case, but we're still rooting for you. Money for nothing, fam, and your chicks for free. Thank you so much. 31 people hanging out. Fam, Vicky Lynn is holding it down over there. We had 122 people. We have 115 people on the Rumble. We've been growing that site every single day, guys. Every single time we come on. Thank you for the support. Do us a favor. The best thing you can do is hit that like button, hit that share button. Fam, we have over 300 people on the YouTubes. Hopefully they won't take it down. 305 right now and climbing. And thank you to everybody over there. I hope you guys enjoyed Patrick Henningsen. It was a great conversation. We'll have
It was great. It was, yeah. A lot of the things he said, I'm right there with him when it comes to the way people view the Great Reset stuff. It's just oversimplified. It's a lot more complicated than that. And I agree with everything he said, like pretty much.
I knew you'd like it, fam.
Yeah.
Fam, that's why I go out and I get you the best guests. I know you deserve the best.
Fam.
Let's get into the next section because it's a good one. We won't be long. Fam is up late nights over there. But this is the fam drone attacks, unleash chaos, air raid, sirens inside Russia. Did you hear anything yesterday?
No. So I'm curious because Russia's very big, Pasta. So what specific region were you?
Let's read into it right here. The attack on the oil facility happened in Tuapse, Tuapse, which lies about 150 miles southeast of the Crimean Peninsula, with Reuters.
Crimean Peninsula.
Yeah. Crimean Peninsula, with Reuters citing local media to report emergency services put out a fire at an oil depot in southern Russia overnight after the drone was spotted flying overhead. The RIA news agency said on Tuesday, crucially, Tuapse is about 500 kilometers from the nearest Ukrainian-held territory, which exhibits significant reach, assuming the UAV was launched by the Ukrainians. UAV meaning the drone itself. And you can see there's a picture right here, fam, going over the Black Sea, I guess.
Krasnodar. Yeah, so that's pretty far south.
So here's another drone now. Russia. I want to the fire. This is the other drone, fam. Really quickly, the fire which started at the facility about 2:30 a.m. was extinguished after the spread to an area of some 200 miles square meters. Excuse me. The oil tanks were not affected. There was no spill of oil products, no injuries, or a local official, Sergei Boyko, described. Another drone, fam, crashed into the Moscow region on the same day, with Governor Andrei Vorobov saying it was likely an operation to target civilian infrastructure. This happened near the village of Guba-Estovo. See, fam, my Russian's not getting better at all. The target was probably a civilian infrastructure facility. It was not damaged. There are no casualties or destruction on the ground, Vorobov said on a Telegram channel, as translated by the Moscow Times. The FSB and other competent authorities are dealing with the situation. Nothing threatens the safety of residents, he added. The Moscow Times notes that the unverified report said the drone was a Ukrainian UJ-22 airborne manufactured by Urkjet. And there you can see it, fam, on the ground in its pieces and with some Russian writing. And here it is, some more stuff. I wanted to show this really quickly, but it just says pretty much air raid sirens and alerts all over Western Russia, including the Moscow region, appeared on TV and radio. Attention, attention. Air raid alert declared. Everyone must immediately seek shelter. risk of a rocket strike. And you can see War Monitor has it up, drones filled with explosive attack. And you can see it right here. I'm just going to show it really quickly, fam. So yeah, fam, that's what happened. And I'm just wondering, I think this was one of those things where they weren't really planning on hitting a target. They were just planning on showing that they can get a drone deep inside of Russia. Your thoughts, anything you're hearing, and your opinions about the situation, fam.
Yeah, so the Russian Defense Ministry stated that the Kiev regime attempted to use an unmanned aerial vehicle to attack civilian infrastructure in the Krasnodar region of the Adygia Republic, which is pretty far south, as Pasta showed on the map. And the UAVs were neutralized. So they obviously don't think that it's that big of a deal, because they would have said as much. I mean, I think it's really interesting that they're so calm right now, but they don't see it as a threat. They just see it as like they're just looking to antagonize.
Yeah.
Because your question is, what will Putin do, right? Like, what will Putin do?
What
I think
what will Putin and the Russian Federation do? Because I should say that Putin goes to his Congress, he goes to his parliament seeking permission before he do anything. He doesn't have an
of
AUMF
course.
like Biden does. And people don't realize that. They think that Putin is more the authoritarian and the dictator. No, Putin always works through his political process, whether it be at home or whether it be, which Patrick Henningsen just talked about, whether it be in global law. You know what I'm saying? So, international law, excuse me. He works through international law, or whatnot. So my question is, first of all, I just like to say that this seems for me like a form of desperation at this point right now from Ukraine. Like, okay, this is the end. Let's try to provoke them to do something stupid so we can try to get more of the international community in, so we can get some nukes or something. That's what I'm seeing right here from this. That's what I'm looking at it. But what do you think Putin will do, or the Russian Federation?
I don't think they're going to do anything outside of what they're already doing. So I think they're just going to focus on Bakhmut or Artyomsk, and they're just going to focus on taking that, because once they take that, as you mentioned earlier, that opens it up for everything else. It opens it up to much easier to go in further. And since Germany is sending all these weapons, the U.S. and Britain are sending these weapons, and now they're having shields, they're going to continue. They're going to continue the offensive strategy that they've decided that they're doing now. What they said that they were going to do in winter, this is going to start really, you're seeing it towards what we consider spring. It's actually spring officially here in Russia. The 1st of March is the beginning of spring here. It's literally not spring to me. It was snowing earlier today. So I think the Russians are wrong on that, but I'll argue with them another day on that issue. But in terms of what the offensive, I think that's what we're going to start seeing in the next few months is them pretty much just push into Ukraine. And of course, the U.S. is going to vilify that and say, look what Russia's doing, blah, 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 look what they're pushing into. So yeah, I don't think this is going to change what they're doing. It's barely, I'm saying that because it's barely been mentioned at all here. So it's interesting.
Yeah, some people think it's Putin walking quietly but carrying a heavy stick, and
of course
he's not gonna listen. The Russian never tips off what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. You never see it coming with them, unlike the United States. Is pretty much they'll put it on a billboard and we'll know our next move. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna be interesting. So we'll just keep an eye on it. It's not big news. It's just something we wanted to do a little reporting on, and I wanted to get Fam's perspective, being that she's on the ground over there. Fam, let's finish up this show. We got two more small sections. One of them is the big news, right? This is something we mentioned to Patrick just before. Bakhmut, right? Which is one of the strategically located areas within Ukraine, in which Zelensky and the Ukrainian regime was very, very strong on holding and talking that they're going to have it and they're going to fortify it. Well, let's take a look at this, fam, because now all of a sudden it's not as important as it was just a couple weeks ago. Zelensky hints at withdrawing from Russian encircled Bakhmut out of options. And a lot of people are saying, okay, once this area is taken by the Russians, then they're going to bring in their reinforcements. Let's not forget, this has been about 20% of their military has been used in this crisis so far, in this military actions. 20% of Russian forces. They're just setting the table up for when they do come in my personal opinion. It's just going to be game over once Bakhmut is taken. It was only in late January, fam, that the Ukraine's military general staff emphasized that any potential forces withdrawal from the strategic city of Bakhmut in the east was out of the question. Can't talk about it. Don't even talk to me about it. Don't even bring it to me, as the situation was said to be under control. Get this a little bit bigger. 1 second. But a month later, the narrative has dramatically shifted amid reports that the Russians are shelling Ukrainian positions around the clock. And as complaints from Ukrainian front lines or assist of not enough ammo, supplies to keep pace with the Russians, President Zelensky, in fresh remarks on the situation, has admitted that the besieged Bakhmut is running out of options. And here it is, fam, the last part of it. Within days, the past days, he has also said for the first time that he won't seek to hold the city at any cost, strongly suggesting Ukraine has suffered a staggering loss in manpower. He said Tuesday, the situation is getting more difficult. The enemy is gradually destroying everything which can be used to protect our position, Zelensky said in his address, stopping short of announcing a pullout. There have been emerging reports of gun battles deep within the city itself, which is a new development. Also, as Russian forces have it nearly fully encircled. The New York Times has also confirmed the commander of the Ukraine ground forces, Colonel General Oleksandr Syrskyi, on Tuesday described the situation around the city as extremely tense in a post on Telegram messaging app. Fam, this was the custard's last stand. This was it for Ukraine. Under no circumstances are we talking about giving it up. Now the Russians have it encircled. They are shelling on a regular basis. The Ukrainians can't keep pace. They don't even have the men. Is there going to be a possible pullout for Zelensky trying to get these troops back over to Kiev? Because this is it. This is the majority of their forces are right here. If they get encircled and they are taken, it's lights out.
What they're gonna try to make it look like it's not a pullout. They're gonna try to do something. This is what Russia is waiting for. I think Patrick mentioned it earlier, a false flag sort of thing, something from the Ukraine to really distract from the fact that they are losing. But Ukraine is losing, and there's no. I mean, like you said, the men are like. That's the majority of their men. The only other thing they can do is try to forcefully recruit people, and people clearly don't want to be recruited. Or, of course, use the NATO troops and the mercenaries that are on the ground. And a lot of those are even leaving too, the mercenaries. So it's not good. I mean, they can really only do so much. Like, all these weapons can be sent, but if you have nobody to operate these weapons, what are you going to do? And it takes a while to operate some of these weapons that the U.S. is sending to, you have to be trained to know how to operate them. So, and they're not going to arrive till like late spring. So this is not a situation where Ukraine can just pretend. They're going to use all the media and all the Western propaganda to say, oh, we're not backing out. We're just moving aside here and blah, blah, blah. They're going to try to invent some PR situation, but I don't think it's just going to stick anymore, really. As well as it has been, because there's only so much of this you can cover with propaganda, but they try. I mean, they do a really good job. They did the whole siren thing when Biden was with Zelensky.
Fam, this is something that our good friend Daryl said. I got to see him at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. Ukraine news today. The Ukrainian military strategy of allowing every town around Bakhmut to be captured and intentionally be surrounded is working perfectly. In spite of advancing Russia, again, lost over 100,000 troops. One Ukrainian soldier complained of an earache. I love our boy. He's just so great. Love you, Daryl. It's awesome. Fam, I do have some videos from Bakhmut real quickly. If you want to take a look at these and let me know your thoughts. This is one of the videos right here. It says civilians are saying they are being evacuated from Artemovsk, which is in Bakhmut by the W.
Artemovsk.
Thank you, Svam. Your Russian is getting better. The Ukrainian military has been aggressive towards them. They've been waiting for 6 months for Russia to come. And you can see these people, fam, they look kind of happy.
Откуда вас выводят? Из Артемовска? Расскажите, кто вас выводит? Вагнер? А как вообще там обстановка сейчас? Накаленная. Накаленная? А как вы слушали тут свежими вещами? Агрессивно. Долго сидели? Долго ждали эвакуации?
6 месяцев.
То есть вы ждали русских, да?
Да. Слушали радио.
Yeah, so she said that the Wagner group was the ones that came and liberated them. Wow, I'm getting better.
She's kind of happy about that.
Yeah,
so
she
you know-
was very happy. Yeah, this is what you don't see. Like people like, oh no, the Russians are hurting these people. No, they see this as a liberation. They're like,
Absolutely.
okay, thank you. We've been waiting. Like Solidar. Like, you know, this is what they see. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can see here in this particular paper, crackhead of Kiev. Fam, I had to use this one. The guy said crackhead of Kiev sacrificed tens of thousands of lives, 800 a day in Bakhmut alone, while his Nazi wife is buying shoes in London. Now around 12,000 of them sit in the city that will fall any day now. Surrender and stop this madness. You can see right here. I'm going to put this map up. Let's see if I can make it bigger right here. But you can see they're
a little
here.
bit bigger.
That's what she's.
Oh,
Right, that's not. Sorry, that's not working. But I can do it this way. This will make it bigger. You can see right here. There. Let me move this a little bit.
That's Artyomov.
So you can see right
That's-
here.
yeah.
That's where they're at, and now they're just getting surrounded. The red
Mhm.
dots. They gotta if they move into this area and cut off the pathway, fam. They're gonna lose the remaining troops that they have. They got to get the hell out of there. I mean, they have no choice right now. They can't keep up with this, Shelly.
Yeah. I'm trying to look at this. Let's see. Okay.
By the way, I have you should take a look at this, ladies and gentlemen. Look how Bakhmut looks like in some parts. It looks like parts of Syria, fam.
Yeah.
And this asshole freaking went into these towns with Ukrainian forces and hid among civilians. And now it looks like that. Now it's destroyed. If you can't see, ladies and gentlemen, you look at it, take a look. Yeah, it's just terrible.
And these cities in the south, and I say the south because where I'm at, I'm like here, and well, doing it from that side. You guys won't. It's far south from Moscow. It takes a while to get there. Okay, so it's much nicer. The weather's nicer. The soil is nicer. These are areas that are just better for people to live in, the up and coming areas, and unfortunately, that's what they look like now.
Destroyed. Lucas Cage, an ex-veteran, fam. Listen to what he has to say. This is some sensible stuff. I just like hearing from more military men at this point because people have to get an idea of what's going on. The Western military lies. Excuse me, the Western media lies. They lie for the military. They tell you all these particular lies that the Ukrainian military is doing well and that they can win this and we got to supply them weapons. That whole thing with Zelensky barking at his mouth saying that, you know, United States troops are going to have to come fight for the Baltic states because once Putin, who's trying to expand the USSR, the old Soviet Union, once he takes Ukraine, he's going to then take the Baltic states, and it's American troops. They just want the gravy train coming. They want you to believe they have a chance that they can do this. They never, ever had a chance. Here's Lucas Cage. Take a look at the list.
If you really care about the Ukrainian people like you claim you do, then listen to me very carefully. My name is Lucas Gage. I served 2 tours in Iraq. I put it in quotes because who did I serve? The special interest who wanted war. How did they get that war? They lied to us. They said Saddam had weapons of mass destruction and he was tied to 9/11. Both lies, and we all know it now. Years later, of course, after all the damage has been done. The same, I believe, is happening with the Ukrainians. The EU, NATO, the US, they don't give a damn about Ukraine. They're using it as a bulwark against Russia because they have an agenda to take out Vladimir Putin. And they're saying, look, the Ukrainians are winning the war. They're pushing here and they're pushing there. That's when Putin has his hands tied behind his back in a special operation, which is limited in nature. But now that he's annexed these regions, whether you agree with it or not, Putin can unleash the full military might of Russia. And the Ukrainians have no chance whatsoever. And that's the lie the media is telling you, that they do have a chance. They don't. In fact, the only way Ukraine has a chance against Russia is if they drag us all into the war with them. And you know what that means? World War III. And you know what else? Unlike Saddam, who didn't have weapons of mass destruction, Russia does. And if they're used, it's not good for anybody, especially the Ukrainians, because who do you think are going to be hit first? So if you really care about the Ukrainians, stop filling their heads up with fantasies. Stop believing the obvious lies of the West. My God, the U.S. just threw Ukraine under the bus about this assassination of Dugina. What do you think? They care? They don't care about the Ukrainians. The EU doesn't care, NATO doesn't care, and the United States most certainly doesn't care about Ukraine or anyone else for that matter. The only thing these people care about, these traitors and globalists at the top, are war, profits, and control. That's all they care about. Don't fall for the lies. If you truly care about the Ukrainians and the Russians, especially the civilians, you want to talk peace right now. Let's push for peace, not.
Yep.
I mean, there's only so many ways you can say it. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're saying this from the get-go. I mean, and these politicians, they do not care. Literally, we're going to fight to the last Ukrainian. We got to pour it on. Like, they just don't give a shit. They'll fucking sacrifice your ass. They don't care about human life. People like Lindsey Graham, people like, what's his name? The dickhead friggin' from West Virginia, the Democrat, that dude that they blame Manchin, everything. Oh, I want to send more money there. Oh, McConnell, we got to stand with Ukraine.
You're just pawns on their chessboard.
They don't give a shit about these people. They never have, and they never will, fam. Fam, what do you got over here?
Oh, yeah. So meanwhile, this was Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, visiting Bucha and Irpin to pay respect to the victims of the Bucha massacre, which was completely debunked, by the way, staged, and also in a similar manner to the Syrian chemical attacks. But also, Ukrainians have been, as you all know, we've talked about many times, being killed by their own military, which is exactly why you see now many of people saying, oh my God, the Russians are here, we're liberated, because that's exactly how some see it. So here it is. Let's just her crying over something that's just completely propaganda. So this is more propaganda, right? Where were these people in Donbass for the last, 14,000 people that have died, for the children, the people that continue to die? It's it's all bullshit. It's all PR. It's all propaganda. And this woman irritates me a lot because a lot of people fell for her bullshit when she first ran because she said she wasn't going to play ball, and then she did, and she turned around and switched it. I interviewed an Italian journalist who was going to Lugansk, and he basically said she was one of those that did the whole switcheroo and did it for votes. So yeah, on that note.
Ah, geez, fam. You called it. Can't say you haven't. You called it. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. If you are a premium member up on Rockfin, like Montreal Momzilla, who keeps me in line, fam, she's a tough one. If I talk too much, she lets me know. She keeps me in line, fam. That's all I got to say. But go over to the Rockfin if you're a premium member. That'd be awesome. We have 33 people hanging out there. If you got a few bucks to leave, you can always do that. For membership is $14.99 a month. We do appreciate it. Vicky Lynn's been holding it down over on the Rumble. We still have over 100 people. We had 122 at one point. Keep helping us grow that site. We have a lot of people, new followers. We're moving up in the Rumble world. Hopefully, we can equate that one day to a few bucks. And we got about 240 people still left hanging on the YouTube. We got that there. So, fam, your favorite politician, she went to Nigeria.
Yeah, so Nigeria's elections have been pretty controversial in terms of some people claiming they were rigged, some people claiming they weren't. But Stacey Abrams was in Nigeria as an election observer. Look, Pasta, she's wearing the vest and everything.
Yep.
She's literally wearing the vest. So she got interviewed, and here's what she had to say. Let's listen to Stacey Abrams, because the United States really needs to be involved in every election in the world, right? Let's hear it.
Ms. Abrams, thank you for being with us. Let me ask you first, what are you seeing thus far at the different polling stations you have visited here in Abuja?
I would say that despite a slow start with the BVAS, we have seen orderly lines, we have seen long lines signaling strong enthusiasm, but we've also seen a great deal of cooperation and a very peaceful conversation among voters. They want to be heard, and they are willing to stand in line and have patience because they know that's their path to progress.
It's interesting you say that, because one of the things that I have observed the past few days, this huge contingent of youth voters that many believe will really play a significant role in this election. And the people that we've been speaking with have said they believe there will be high turnout today. You, of course, are well known in the United States for your activism, for being a political figure, an author, somebody who has done so much to try to expand voting rights. From the conversations that you have had, especially with youthful voters here in Nigeria, what is the takeaway?
Well, I've had a chance to speak with Yaga and with a number of youth voters across the state. And what they've said almost uniformly is they want to be heard. They believe progress is possible. They believe that more is possible. They understand that they are the most assailed by unemployment, that the challenges they face are real, but that so is the opportunity for change. What we've tried to have a conversation about, though, is the caution that not every election turns out the way you want, but that the responsibility is to show up and try to shape the future as much as you can.
One of the things that I didn't like that she said was that long lines show enthusiasm. Yeah, okay, but you shouldn't have very long lines because that's going to create a problem for the efficiency of the vote.
Absolutely.
So they do this again all the time.
Every time.
They
Every time.
Yeah. So
It's
she's
stupid
there.
questions too, by
also-
the way, right, fam? It's in other words, we had the chance to ask, well, Stacey, would you want to kind of import some of the stuff they have here in the Nigerian election over the United States? You're talking about you're so enthused about it. How about one day of voting in the United States? I know they don't have no mail-in or drop boxes here in Nigeria. You want to do that in the United States? How about
I
public
wasn't gonna
counting?
ask that
How about public counting? All this stuff. Like, they'll stay away from that. That's why we say the number one culprit when it comes to what the government's doing or the military's doing or the State Department's doing is the mainstream media. They're just as guilty, if not more guilty. They fucking set the table for these politicians to go ahead and lie, to act like she's there on a humanitarian mission to make sure there's fair elections. Meanwhile, those elections that will probably be messed with as is, right? Because I've heard shit about Nigerian elections, a lot of shit going on. Somebody was telling me if you want to get a go over there, you can. I said it was just too much of a short amount of time. Yeah. But even with their elections right there, I mean, they're so much better than our elections. But they're going to try to muddy the waters, try to make it like she's even telling them, hey, listen, there's going to be some shit going on. You might not like the whole results of this because we're going to cheat you. We want our guy in there, but keep participating. Because, America has that foothold. It has that strength. It has that grab on Nigeria. Go ahead, fam.
So from what I've learned, Nigeria's elections are quite complicated. There's not a candidate that's really strong, super, anti-West candidate. All of the candidates are all right. Some of them are more pro-West than others. There was a winner, and we can talk about that. But I find what I wanted to highlight from that clip is like, why does Stacey Abrams have to go to Nigeria's elections? Why did Blinken make a video with several other U.S. officials encouraging Nigerians to go out and vote? I just find that really weird. It's not like I don't know, all these other countries send their videos encouraging us to vote. You know what I'm saying? Like, Why do we feel like we have any jurisdiction? Why does an American politician know about electoral integrity? What does an American politician know about electoral integrity? Literally nothing, because we don't have fair elections. So I had to show that tweet from Gritty. And then the next thing I wanted to show is Nico's tweet. Why was Stacey Abrams in Nigeria to oversee their election process? What business or authority does a U.S. politician have to interfere in an African country's election process? They don't, but they've been interfering in Africa and in its election process for a while. This is why what's happening in Burkina Faso with the ousting of the French is such a big deal, because they see the West as trying to have this neo-colonial attitude in Africa, and Africa is fighting to free itself from that. Now, Nigeria has endured civil strife. I mean, there was several people were murdered. There was a person that attacked the crowd trying to dissuade them from voting. I mean, there's been so many things happening with this election, and it's Nigeria is Africa's biggest economy, so it's an important election. Okay, it's the most populated, biggest economy, and it's
Yeah.
got its own issues.
We want to make sure that not necessarily our candidate gets in, but somebody else's candidate. Like, we don't want any type of candidate that's going to look elsewhere outside the United States, look to China or Russia for help. So we want to make sure that we have a controlled environment. It says, winner declared a Nigerian presidential election. Bola Tinubu, fam, received the most votes according to the official tally, but opponents claim the process was rigged.
Yeah, so I'm going to read it real quick. So the ruling party candidate Bola Tinubu has been declared the winner of the presidential election in Nigeria, and opposition groups disputed the results and are still demanding a new vote. The Independent National Election Commission, or the INEC, is a body there that oversaw the voting process. This would be equivalent to in Nicaragua's, central election officials that we looked at when we looked, and also what was it in Brazil, Pasta? The
TSE.
TSE in Brazil.
And I think they're also called the TRE in certain parts. Like, they have two names, like the OAS and the OAN. I think that's the TRE and the TSE, if I'm sure.
So they all have like their own independent names. So by Wednesday, if you can scroll back up.
Oh, Mom, did I go too far?
Okay.
My bad.
Yeah.
All right, here.
Okay. So no. Yeah. So by Wednesday, Tinubu had received more than 25% of the vote in 30 of Nigeria's 36 states, which was enough for a victory. He was a member of the All Progressives Congress, the APC party, and a former governor of the Lagos state, and received 8.7 million votes in total. Atiku Abubakar, who seems like the more status quo than all of them, the former vice president and Tinubu's main rival, received over 6.9 million votes, while Peter Obi, he was the youngest one of the Labour Party, pulled third with more than 6.1 million votes. Peter Obi is one of the people that's challenging the elections. The Constitution barred the current president, Muhammadu Buhari, from seeking a third term. So far, that's what's been happening. Some of the reports were that people were not allowed to vote, that the machines weren't working, that there was just insecurity. So they had moved some elections from Saturday to Sunday, and then they moved some of the elections to next week. But overall, there's been a declared winner. So that's pretty much what's going on. There's a lot more as to what exactly has happened. There's a lot of things people have been asserting that there's something wrong there with the elections. I think you have a tweet. Let me see if there's anything else that I want to mention from Nigeria, because we can't not cover Nigeria's elections. We cover elections, but the Abu Bakar, from the People's Democratic Party, said that the election was irretrievably compromised and demanded the results would be nullified. The election is not free and far from being fair, Labour Party Chairman Julius Abure told reporters on behalf of the three parties, while calling on the INEC chairman to resign. And they previously criticized the organization for lengthy delays in publishing the results from nearly 177,000 polling stations. So, by the way, they used PASTA, an electronic tallying process, during Saturday's vote for the first time. That is the one thing that I wanted
The
to
first
highlight and
time.
that
Wow.
caught my eye. This is the first time that they've used this process. That doesn't automatically mean it's rigged. However, it does lend me suspicion that this is the first time, and there are various people from various parties, not just one, saying that the elections were rigged. And also, I've seen a lot in the media saying this was the most democratic election in Nigeria's history. I've seen a lot of the media say that. However, on the other hand, I'm seeing, oh, this is the first time you use electronic voting machines, and they delayed the publishing of results from 177,000 polling stations. From what we know in our expertise, that is very suspect. The only way that would happen is if you don't have the resources, which is very probable that there was a delay in the resources in certain polling, depending on where they are. That's totally possible. However, that is also lends itself to, who are the people in these areas? Who are the people that are, that are most likely voting for X candidate? And so I'm trying to get more information from people there, what, exactly specifically the intricacies, because Nigeria's politics is far more complicated than anything I've ever dealt with in Latin America. Latin America's, I know it very well. Nigeria, not so much. So I've been trying to ask some people about this, and we've had some guests on our tea, and it's just kind of hard with the language barrier as well to get all this stuff out. So fam, we'll have to be looking out, because this does not look good. They're saying that this is not a fair election, and yeah. So again, it's hard to say at this point, but it doesn't look like it was as flawless as others are making it to be.
Yeah, it's interesting. I got some people who know some stuff about it. I'm gonna take a look into it too as well. Just so much going on. But yeah, fam. And I got one more tweet up here too as well. This is just on another note, really quickly. Nan McCurdy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yes.
she put some stuff up. Let's show this really quick. This
Okay.
is Nicaragua.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is something I wanted to point out, guys, because we've been to Nicaragua. So Blinken meets with the condemned Nicaraguan criminals responsible for 253 murders during the U.S.-directed coup attempt in 2018. Our friend talked to us about it, specifically how they killed people that they knew. They are U.S. agents. The U.S. paid them and sent money to their NGOs. That money was used for the coup. The U.S. public is being duped by corporate media, because the U.S. public is being told that these people are liberated Nicaraguans, and they're, we need to stand with them, and this is great, and these people are free, and they betrayed their country. It would be like us actually having an attempted coup attempt and trying to take over and coup the U.S. government, and then Russia receiving us and like embracing us and saying, "Oh, look at these liberated Americans." It would be like that, except that, I don't know, we might be justified. But never mind. But yeah, so that's that. But they're not framing it like that. They're framing it like, "Oh, these victims of Nicaragua's authoritarian regime." Nan is one of the people that was in our delegation to Nicaragua. And this is what Blinken said. "It was powerful to meet with some of the freed Nicaraguan political prisoners who were recently arrived in the U.S. I was struck by their brave stories and commitment to a better future for Nicaragua. We thank them and their families for their sacrifices in the name of democracy."
Political prisoners, huh? What the fuck is
Yeah.
Julian Assange?
Coup plotters, that doesn't ring a bell, right? So we have people in jail right now for January 6th, but he calls them political prisoners. These people, yeah. So there
Disgusting.
you go. That's, yeah. And we know,
Disgusting.
we went to
Disgusting
Nicaragua.
looking
We
at.
heard the stories of what happened in 2018. We heard the stories.
Tortured,
This is why
killed.
Nicaraguans are so angry. Why Daniel Ortega's like, "Get out, Yankee."
Yeah.
Go home, because they do not want any sort of coup attempt to happen ever again.
Mm-hmm.
So
Anyways,
anyway, folks.
Fam, that's it for today. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Vicky Lynn, for holding it down with Fred Edward over there on that Rumble, and all our other peeps who've been there. Death to Tyrants, you're amazing as well. Everybody who joined the conversation, we appreciate you growing that platform and continue to share and like that stuff. Rockfin, we had about 33 premium members hanging on out. We have to 38 now, which is great. So thank you. If you guys got a few bucks to spare, go on over to Rockfin and subscribe for $14.99 a month to get all premium content from all creators across the board. We are still waiting for their program where we can have an individual subscription. And once we get that there, we will make a nice, cheap, inexpensive one for you guys. And of course, on YouTube, had over 300 at one point, about 200 and change right now. We want to thank you guys for coming on in today. Fam, anything new going on? Something coming up? Something special?
No, I'm just going to take some time to celebrate my birthday this weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The world was a better place when Fam came into it.
Hooah!
So that's it for today,
When
guys.
the world
Was a better
Are you
place.
giving me a compliment?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you said the world was a better place before I came into it.
I said when you
See,
came into it, Fam. You're
I'm
your
used to
mind is
hearing
always there.
negative things.
In an hour, I'm going to be on the backstory with Lee Stranahan on his show on Sputnik Radio. Sputnik for the first time. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I'll go on that show. We're gonna
Lee's
talk
fun.
about. Oh yeah, I'm gonna go hang out with Lee, talk with Lee about some stuff over
Tell
there.
him I said hi.
I will definitely say hi. And that's it for me today. Tomorrow, I will probably be on the Trailer Park Pundit right after the morning show, and we'll be back on Friday. Fam, you might be on assignment on Friday, so if I have to hold it down, I will hold it down. Happy birthday, fam!
On assignment. I love how you take that and run with it. On assignment. But yes, I'll be on assignment.
So
Russian
that's it for today,
assignment.
ladies and gentlemen, fam. You know what I'm saying?
No, I'm trying to
Give a
offer.
shit about the fucking marmot.
Watch out for the marmot, fam. This is it for today. Pasta Jardula.
Fiorella. Combo out.
Thank God, man.
Jeez.
Fam.
God,
Oh
you
my
can't come
Lord.
up with a little variation. Everything has to be exactly the same. Jesus Christ.
Fam, we have branding, and that means we have to do what we got to do. That's it, everybody.
No,
We'll see you
no, I
Friday.
don't do that.